It is said that ancient objects can accumulate spirits, becoming ensouled and causing mischief, so it's best not to touch them, as they might harm you. A friend of mine, Aiden, once told me a story about seeing a female ghost in a mirror. One day, Aiden and his girlfriend Bella were taking their wedding photos. After they finished, it was already dark outside. Bella pleaded with him, "Aiden, it's too late, I'm scared to stay at home alone. Will you keep me company?" Honestly, his acquaintance with Bella was brief, like a whirlwind marriage. He had never met Bella's parents, who, she told him, were abroad and couldn't return in time. He had not even been to Bella's house. With their wedding just days away, he had been eager to visit. Now, with Bella's request, he didn't think twice before agreeing. Bella's home was in the outskirts. They took the bus for several stops before arriving. Bella lived in a 3-story old-style building that seemed to have many years to its name. The entire building's walls were densely covered with ivy, giving it a decrepit appearance. It said that this building was heavy with energy and often haunted. Previous elderly residents were scared into moving to the city, and now, only 3 or 4 households remained, including Bella's on the 2nd floor at the westernmost end. She was the only resident left on that floor. There was no moonlight due to the bad weather, and as they walked down the 2nd floor corridor, they felt an oppressive gloom enveloping them. When they reached the door at the end of the corridor, Bella said eerily, "Aiden, we're finally home." What struck him as odd was that Bella didn't take out a key, the door was blown open by a chilly wind instead. Entering the room, it was pitch dark, and he couldn't see his own fingers. Frowning, he said, "Bella, turn on the light." In a ghostly voice, Bella replied, "Aiden, the lights here broke a long time ago. I'll light a candle." With that, she took out a lighter and quickly lit a candle. By the feeble candlelight, he could barely make out the room, which was in disarray and looked long uninhabited, with a thick layer of dust everywhere. The window was tightly shut across from the door. There was only a bed in the room, which at first glance seemed to have someone lying on it, but he realized upon closer inspection it wasn't a person, but a white quilt. Looking at the white quilt before him, he frowned and asked Bella, "Bella, only the dead cover with a white quilt. Why is there one on your bed?" Bella smiled mysteriously and said, "White is elegant and pure. I want my bed to be clean and comfortable to sleep in. That's why I like covering it with a white quilt." Her reasoning seemed to make sense, so he didn't think much more of it. Then he noticed an ancient mirror hanging on the wall opposite the bed. It looked very eerie. In its reflection stood silently a beautiful girl dressed in ancient garments. Seeing the beautiful girl in ancient attire in the mirror, who looked very much like Bella, he curiously asked Bella, "Is that girl in the mirror you, Bella?" Bella nodded, sighed, and said, "This ancient mirror was left to me as a dowry by my grandmother. It was her beloved possession and had accompanied her for many years. Before she passed away, she told me that this mirror is a treasure, our family heirloom, and that it would take me and my future husband to visit her in the spirit world. She urged me to protect it with my life. Last year, a photographer took a series of photos of me. I went to an antique shop and had a master craftsman use a magical solution to transfer my image from one of those photos into this mirror, forever preserving my likeness within it." At this point, sadness flickered across Bella's expression, as if she was reluctant to share this story. Hearing Bella's words, he laughed it off, "Silly Bella, you must have read too many time travel novels. Those travels are just made up by authors, there's no such thing as actual travel through time. It must be your grandmother tricking you." Looking at the ancient mirror again, he excitedly said, "But this mirror must be a treasure. If we took it to an antique shop, it could surely fetch a good price." Bella seemed quite upset by his words, her face turning pale as she said while sobbing, "My grandmother loved me a lot, she would never deceive me. But even if it's valuable, I would never sell it." Seeing Bella upset, he gently kissed her cheek to comfort her, until she broke into a smile and said, "Aiden, I'm tired. I want to lie down and rest a bit." With that, she lay down on the bed, and he lay beside her. The two of them then started chatting about the details of the wedding ceremony they would be having in a few days. When it came to discussing how to furnish their new bedroom, he became excited, playfully teasing Bella. Bella didn't get annoyed. Instead, she gave him a sweet smile, which perhaps provoked him. Suddenly, he pounced on Bella, covering her mouth with one hand and embracing her slender waist with the other, relentlessly kissing her lips. She didn't show any signs of repulsion, and soon they became entangled with each other. At the height of their fervor, he accidentally saw Bella's reflection in the ancient mirror across the bed, giving him a creepy smile. He was so frightened that he immediately jumped off Bella and hid under the covers, shivering. Seeing him act so strangely, Bella eerily asked, "Aiden, what's wrong? Are you feeling okay?" It took him a moment to recover, and then he peeked out from the blanket, pointing at the mirror. "Bella, look, you in the mirror can smile." Bella glanced at the mirror dismissively. "Aiden, you must be tired from the wedding photo shoot today. It's just an illusion. It's only my image, how can it smile?" Hearing Bella's words, it seemed logical to him. He must have been too exhausted from the day's photo shoot, causing the illusion. With this thought, he didn't dwell on it further. However, he was no longer in the mood to be intimate with Bella and decided to leave for home. A few days later, he returned to the old building to find Bella, but her door was tightly locked, the lock covered in rust as if it had not been opened for a long time. He tried calling Bella's cell phone, only to hear a busy signal that made it impossible to reach her. They were supposed to marry the next day, and now he couldn't find her, which made him incredibly anxious. He hurriedly asked the residents living near the old building about Bella, and an old lady told him that Bella had died in a car accident 6 months ago. Her death was peculiar. During the accident, she accidentally dropped an ancient mirror from her handbag onto the middle of the road. A speeding truck was about to crush the mirror, but to save it from being shattered by the truck's wheels, she threw herself on top of the mirror to protect it. When the truck had passed over her, people found her dead, gruesomely mangled, yet her hands were still firmly guarding the undamaged ancient mirror. At first, people were puzzled as to why she would sacrifice her life to protect the mirror. Later, they found out that the mirror was the heirloom of her family. After her grandmother passed away, the mirror was handed down to her, and she cherished it as much as her life. No wonder she had protected it at the cost of her own life. Only then did Aiden realize that Bella had been dead for quite some time, and the Bella he had been interacting with these past days was actually her spirit. Thinking of Bella in the mirror sent chills all over his body. After that, he never went back to the old building where Bella had lived, nor did he see the ancient mirror again. However, Bella would occasionally appear in his dreams, giving him that eerie smile. This is a very peaceful village. Everyone here calls him Bachelor Jack. In fact, he's never robbed nor stolen, and the only bad thing he's ever done in his life was make the village chief's little daughter cry, which got him chased and beaten for 2 li and locked up in the woodshed for 3 days. By the time everything was cleared up and he was released, his leg had already become crippled. In his own words, he just wanted to give the little girl a sweet. People disliked Jack because of his face. He had a strange appearance, his mouth turned up in a wide smile while his eyes drooped down, a flat bridge of nose with nostrils that flared upwards, giving his face a terrifying expression of a smirk that wasn't quite a smile. Children cried upon seeing him, and adults would steer clear. He had no friends. Whenever the village children were disobedient, the adults would threaten them by saying, "If you don't behave, I'll call Jack over." He was the village's scourge. Nobody liked him. Jack's ancestors had left him a few acres of land which was just enough to get by on. After he became lame, he rented it out and would occasionally hobble over to check on the fields from a distance, then limp back home. People who saw Jack at these times said he looked odd. From the side, it appeared as if he was smiling, but up close, it felt like he was crying. Before Jack became crippled, the old village chief died. The chief's family asked Jack to help carry the coffin and embrace the deceased. As the accomplished youths of the village had all left for the city, he was the only one willing to do it. Jack devoted himself to this task, and with the money earned, he didn't buy goods for himself but instead bought a mongrel dog. It was yellow-skinned, skinny like him, and quite ugly. From then on, Jack often helped the villagers by carrying their dead. When he did, the dog would silently follow by his side with its head hung low, never barking, occasionally lifting its gaze to peek at the path ahead. The villagers said that Jack was just too lonely. The new village chief was originally a city dweller, who, after a long time without finding work post-graduation, registered for an exam and was assigned to this place as the village head, to support grassroots construction. In his first month, he implemented reforms, intending to switch from burial to cremation, claiming it was scientific. On the day he announced the reform, Jack, with his dog, made his way to the chief's home, limping unevenly, and late at night squatted at his door, calling out the village chief's name. The village chief, rubbing his sleepy eyes and carrying a lit lamp, came to the door and upon opening it, was so startled by Jack that he screamed. Lamp oil splashed onto Jack's cotton clothes, leaving little black burnt holes. Jack looked sadly at his best clothes that he had specifically worn to meet people, sniffled, and the dog straightened up, tightening its fur. The chief was somewhat irritated by Jack. He certainly knew why Jack had come. With cremations, Jack would lose his business and become poorer than he already was. The chief didn't let Jack into the house and blocked him at the door. The cold wind was howling as he rattled off the well-thought-out justifications he had prepared, bombarding Jack with big ideas until Jack was startled. By the time he finished, Jack hadn't yet gotten a chance to speak when the chief closed the door on him. "It's late, you go and rest." Afterwards, regardless of how much Jack knocked, there was no response. So the cremations began, and Jack rapidly lost his livelihood. The town's funeral parlor's business suddenly picked up, while Jack, in even more tattered clothes, lead his dog and dragged his bad leg to sit on the ridge of the fields, watching people come and go with small boxes containing ashes. Then he would turn back, patting the dog's head while constantly sighing and sniffling. The dog nestled beside him, making nearly sobbing noises. The village people despised them, saying they were truly alike. Even the dog was so unlucky. Later, Jack encountered the village chief's young niece, thinking about ingratiating himself with the child, so that she might speak well of him to her uncle, perhaps yielding some leniency. However, just as Jack reached for a candy in his pocket, the little girl ran away crying, calling for help as she went. Good Samaritans, those unaware of the truth, united like never before, taking sticks and chasing Jack to beat him. Jack, his head bleeding heavily, ran with all his might until, hearing his dog barking, he looked back to see the people had grabbed the dog's leash and were beating it as well. He then turned back, roaring and throwing himself on the dog to protect it. In this way, man and dog were beaten amidst their screams for several hours. In the end, the dog was pulled away, and Jack was locked in the woodshed. Once the little girl clarified the situation, the village chief, embracing his sense of justice, waved his hand to signify, "Let it be," and Jack was released. By then, the dog had grown horribly thin, and Jack, with his head lowered, dragged his lame leg slowly back home. From that point on, Jack was rarely seen in the village, and people gradually forgot he ever existed. The incident happened on a night when Jack had too much to drink and forgot to properly leash his dog, which stealthily ran out. In the dead of night, when the village should have been silent, a series of screams erupted. Immediately, every household turned on their lights, throwing on clothes to rush out and see. The screams came from the village chief's house. Jack's dog had bitten the chief's leg. The chief lay on the ground, blood pooled around him, nearly unconscious, while the dog sat eerily beside him, baring its teeth at the chief. With its tail tucked, back hunched, and bony frame, it stood guard over the chief, warding off people and seeming ready to pounce again on the barely breathing chief at any moment. In its eyes, there was something that resembled outright hatred. Strong young men approached from several directions and, catching the dog off guard, knocked it on the head with a stick. The dog shuddered and then lay still on the ground, motionless. The chief was carried to the county hospital, and although the bite was bone-deep and bled profusely, it wasn't life-threatening. The chief returned to the village soon after, treated like a hero. Jack hobbled over, crying desperately, nearly kneeling and bowing to admit his fault, begging the village chief to return his dog, vowing to keep a closer watch in the future. The village chief looked at Jack with revulsion, feeling a nameless rage inside, and ordered people to drag the dog over. In front of Jack, he declared that a dog that had bitten someone couldn't be kept, and with his own hands, he beat the dog to death with a stick. The villagers still shudder at the memory of that day. With the dog's feeble cries and Jack kneeling, pressed down by the shoulders, crying out hoarsely, his face smeared with dirt and half-skinned, blood streaming from his droopy eyes to the corner of his terrifying mouth, like a streak of blood tears. As time went by, the dog's noises ceased, so did Jack's. Two ugly creatures face to face. Even as the surrounding crowd dispersed, Jack still rolled on the ground, trembling, reaching out to stroke the dog's fur. People whispered among themselves, saying the village chief was a bit too cruel. But it was just whispers. After all, it was an act of retaliation, and it was Jack's dog. Combining these two factors typically amounts to another phrase, deserving death. Jack took the dog's corpse back home and didn't come out for many days. The children, curious, peered through his window and discovered the dog's body still lying on Jack's bed, with Jack staring blankly at it, touching its withered fur, then covering his face and letting out a chilling sigh. About a month after the incident, Jack was finally seen in town. He had sold his only cotton-padded jacket and, with the money, entered a small shop to buy a few bottles of alcohol. That money was probably all that Jack had left. The onlookers speculated that Jack wanted to pay tribute to his dog. Then, for 2 consecutive nights, creaking sounds came from Jack's house, like the noise made when teeth gnaw on bones. The children wanted to investigate but were stopped by the adults. Everyone suspected that Jack might be eating the meat of his dead dog. But on the 3rd day, people suddenly thought of another possibility. This possibility sent shivers down their spines, and no one had the courage to verify it firsthand. Because they realized that during the 3 days when Jack started chewing on bones, the village chief's family had not been seen. When Jack finally finished, staggering out the door with the smell of alcohol on his breath, and went alone to the graveyard outside the village, the villagers ran to his house to look. Blood was everywhere in the house, with a heavy stench that made one nauseous. On Jack's bed, they found his dog, already decomposed. Jack hadn't eaten the dog. After that night, Jack was never seen again, nor was the village chief's family. They disappeared together from this world, with no one daring to find out what really happened. Thus, the small village continued to exist peacefully in this world.